Hi, welcome to ANCESTRAL Recap. Your village is about to be attacked by frightening monsters capable of destroying all humanity and only you are able to save it. In today's video, we will explore the adventures of Nausicaä of the Valley of the Wind. A masked outsider travels through a forest, where, apparently, there was a village that was destroyed and taken over by the trees. Inside that place was the rotten sea, a swamp that produced toxic gas and threatened human survival. 5 minutes of breathing the air of that forest was enough to kill a person, so humans created special masks to protect themselves from that gas. Nausicaä, the princess of the Valley of the Wind, is a great explorer of this place. Unlike most of the villagers, the girl is passionate about the forest and the animals that live in it. One day, while walking through that place, she finds the dead body of an omu, an ancient creature that has healing powers. Nausicaä approaches and tries to use her sword on the animal's carapace. However, his skeleton is hard enough to cause damage to the sword. As Omu was already dead, the young woman intended to use his resistant body as material so that her people could produce new weapons. The princess climbs the animal's body until she reaches one of its eyes. She then spreads gunpowder around the eye and uses her shotgun to light the fire. That way, she manages to rip off the protective dome. A few minutes later, while contemplating the pollen released by those giant plants, Nausicaä hears an attack coming from the other side of the forest. She climbs to the highest part to see what was happening and sees an omu that is out of control destroying everything in its path. The girl takes her glider and flies there. When she arrives at the scene, she finds a guy running around with 2 ostriches while trying to escape the enraged omu that was chasing them. Nausicaä tries to calm the creature, but the monster was blinded with rage. She then decides to throw some flash bombs as she knew it would leave him stunned. Then she uses a whistle whose sound acts as a tranquilizer for the animals in the forest. Then, the princess manages to calm Omu and his eyes change color. What was once red like blood, now turns blue like water. The animal wakes up and slowly walks back into the forest. After this act of courage, Nausicaä lands on the sand and realizes that man was Yupa, the greatest swordsman in the region. He was a resident of her village and was returning from a trip after a year and a half away. The girl notices that there is something moving inside one of his pockets. Yupa opens his fanny pack and a fox squirrel jumps out. He says he saw a bird trying to prey it and, as he thought it was a baby fox, the man shot the animal to save it. And it was the sound of the shot that made that omu so angry. The animal was quite scared and aggressive, to the point of biting Nausicaä. However, the girl manages to calm him down. When she realizes that she is not in danger, the fox acts docile and decides to accompany the girl, who nicknames him Tito. After meeting her newest friend, the princess runs to the ostriches, Kai and Kui, who had left a year and a half ago together with Yupa and are very happy to see her again. At that moment, the man realizes that Nausicaä has a mysterious gift that makes all animals feel attracted to her. The girl uses the glider to return to her village and announce Yupa's arrival. Minutes later, the man arrives at the village and is enthusiastically welcomed by the villagers. That night, Yupa meets with the king of that valley, father of Nausicaä, who was sick from high exposure to the forest's poison. Along with them was the village sage, an old woman named Obaba. She tells of a prophecy about the savior who will be wearing a blue suit and land on a golden field to unite the bonds between humanity and Mother Nature. That person will guide the people to a pure land, far from the disastrous effects of the rotten sea. Yupa claims that the story is nothing more than a legend and says that his greatest desire is to find out if humanity is destined to be swallowed by the rotten sea, as happened with the village he found before returning to the Valley of the Wind. That night, Nausicaä is awakened by Mito. The man reveals that there is a strange smell in the air. They spot a Toramikian airship passing under the valley. The plane almost crashed into the village. The princess realizes that the pilots are trying to make an emergency landing, so she takes her glider and goes after the ship to see if anyone needs help. Tito appears and jumps on the girl's shoulder. Together they fly to the plane and Nausicaä spots dozens of omus destroying the ship. She soon concludes that airship must have landed in the forest and killed several animals, which aroused the omus's fury. Unable to see what is in his way, the pilot drives the ship towards a cliff and crashes into the mountain, causing a huge explosion. The young woman walks through the flames in search of any survivors. She finds a girl and manages to pull her out of the rubble. The girl is chained and introduces herself as Lastel, princess of the town of Pejete. The residents of the valley arrive soon after, but unfortunately Lastel is unable to survive her injuries. From the wreckage of the explosion, Ashabu emerges, a giant insect that was about to attack those men. They plan to shoot the animal, however, Nausicaä appears in time to stop them. The girl uses her whistle as a bait to attract the insect and launches the object into the air. Ashabu flies after it and the girl climbs into her glider to retrieve the whistle and accompany the animal back to the forest. The next morning, residents of the valley were checking the damage caused by the plane crash. At that moment, they find a giant egg. Yupa notices that thing is pulsing, as if it were alive. He says that during his trip, he heard stories about a monster from the old world that was slumbering beneath Pejete. That monster was a descendant of the god warriors, who dominated the planet for thousands of years, but ended up turning to stone. Only one of them slept on Earth for 1,000 years in Nausicaä, a cruel military base, wanted to incorporate that creature into their army. As the villagers tried to clean up the mess left over from the accident that happened the night before, Nausicaän aircrafts invaded the valley. Nausicaä orders everyone to hide in the castle and heads to her father's quarters, which was about to be invaded. The girl hears gunshots and quickly runs to the cover of the tower. Upon arriving there, she finds her father dead, with several soldiers around him. The princess attacks the soldiers and manages to eliminate them. Then men with metal armor appear in the room and Nausicaä prepares to destroy them. However, the girl is stopped by Yupa, who puts himself in front of her sword and asks the girl to calm down, because if she attacks them at that moment all of the people would be slaughtered. A few minutes later, Kushana, the commander of Nausicaä's army, appears and states that he is not there with the intention of fighting, just plans to talk to the villagers. During her speech, the woman says that she wants to unify peoples and thus bring peace to that region. She plans to wipe out the Rotten Sea and asks the residents of the Valley of the Wind to join her in this quest. Obaba interrupts her and says that every time some nation tried to destroy the Rotten Sea, an army of Omis blinded with rage took over the earth and consumed everything under the surface until there was nothing left and they starved to death. Karadawa, Kushana's advisor, orders the old woman to be silent. The woman then reveals to the villagers that man was responsible for the king's death and the people revolt. To prevent further deaths from happening, Nausicaä asks them to calm down and follow the army's guidelines. Kushana informs that she will take Nausicaä, along with 5 other prisoners, to the village of Pejete. The next morning, they prepare for the trip. Yupa informs Mito that he will stay in the village to stop them from resurrecting the giant warrior. The princess enters the battleship together with Tito. Before leaving, she promises that, very soon, she will return to her people. A few minutes after takeoff, the girl notices that a fighter plane is approaching. The pilot shoots and manages to shoot down one of Nausicaä's airships. Soon after, the second aircraft is hit and collides with the third, causing a large explosion. Only the main aircraft remains in the air, but it also ends up being bombed. A small fighter ship approaches the fighter plane and manages to shoot it down. The airship in which Nausicaä was being held is on fire, so the girl along with Mito heads towards the emergency ship. But before she can take off, Kushana appears and escapes with them on the plane. The princess asks the woman and the old man to put on the masks, as she would fly over the forest. Tito was hidden inside Nausicaa's coat and her body was warm, which indicated that the fox was still alive. Below the clouds, she finds the other 5 prisoners from the Valley of the Wind who also survived the blast. The 2 airships land in a forest river and Kushana tries to remain in her power by pointing a gun at the girl, even after being saved by her. The princess realizes that there is something strange happening in the forest, as the animals were furious. She asks her companions to prepare to leave that place, but the army commander shoots and says that the men should only follow her orders. At that moment, some Omis emerge from the depths of that river and approach the aircraft. Nausicaä tries to calm them down and is enveloped by that creature's tentacles. At that moment, the girl has a vision. She spots a light coming out of a gigantic tree, but can't identify what it was. The Omis back away and their eyes turn blood red. They head to another part of the forest along with other enraged animals. The princess takes her glider and follows them in order to find out what is going on. On the other side of the forest, a young man tries to escape the creatures that are chasing him. To survive the attack of those animals, the young man needs to jump off a cliff, where other monsters were waiting for him. When he was about to be devoured by a flying centipede, Nausicaä appears and saves him. She manages to dodge the creature's attack, but her glider's wing crashes into the animal's tail and they fall into the forest. The young man looks around and sees Nausicaä unconscious. He runs to her and finds that they are both trapped in quicksand. They end up being pulled in. When she wakes up, Nausicaä is greeted by Tito. The animal was hiding in her clothes all this time. The princess looks around and realizes that she is in an unknown place, which was strange as she had already explored the entire forest. A few minutes later, the young man appears and brings the glider with him. He introduces himself as Asbel, Prince of Pejete. The young man was the twin brother of Lastal, the girl who was killed during the fire that occurred after the crash of Nausicaä's airship. Asbel reveals that they were both sucked under the Rotten Sea, so the air was pure in that region. Nausicaä decides to explore that peculiar place. She discovers that sand was actually just dust released by the surface trees that were turned to stone. After fixing the glider, Asbel and the girl get ready for bed. They need to regain their strength to get out of that place the next morning. Meanwhile, in the Valley of the Wind, the army worked day and night to revive the god warrior. That creature was their main weapon in the battle they planned to wage against the animals of the forest. Yupa is informed that Mito and his companions have returned to the village and are waiting for him in the acid lakes. Upon arriving there, the man is surprised to find Kushana along with the villagers. He asks the woman to destroy that animal and leave the village along with the soldiers, but she says that she will go ahead with her plan to attack the forest and destroy the rotten sea. While they were discussing the future of the Valley of the Wind, a young man appeared and informed them that some spores from the trees in the forest had appeared in the village and were releasing lethal toxins. If they didn't hurry, all the villagers would be intoxicated and killed. They cut the roots of the trees and verify that all had already been infected. Then, Obaba says that the only option is to burn everything, otherwise the village would be consumed by the rotten sea. Nausicaä and Asbel fly over the forest until they reach the village of Pejete. On the way, they find dozens of dead insects and, from afar, they can see a lot of smoke coming out of the city. When they arrive at the place, they realize that the place was full of insects scattered everywhere. Asbel is terrified to see that the village has been taken over by forest animals. A few minutes later, a plane lands on the outskirts of the village. There were the survivors of that attack. Some soldiers inform Asbel that they discovered that the Torimikians were in the Valley of the Wind and would attack them that night. Those men planned to anger the animals of the forest and direct the attack towards the Valley of the Wind. Hearing this, Nausicaä asks them to desist from this plan as innocent people would also be killed, but unfortunately it was too late. The animals had already destroyed Pejete and were on their way to the valley. The princess needs to get out of that place and warn her people about the attack, but the soldiers hold the glider and prevent the girl from escaping. Asbel takes the pistol from one of the men and orders his people to release Nausicaä. But he is attacked from behind and ends up passing out. In the Valley of the Wind, the population revolts and fights the Torimikian soldiers. 3 old men manage to take the battle tank and go on top of the enemies. They destroy the bridge that connects the tower to the rest of the village and begin bombing the enemies while the villagers flee to hide in the acid lakes. However, they cannot hold the soldiers for long. Soon after, other tanks appear and they are hit. Meanwhile, fighter planes patrolled the skies. They locate a Pejete airship and go after it. Nausicaä and Tito are trapped in the ship's pantry when they receive a visit from a woman and a girl. The woman introduces herself as Asbel's mother and reveals that she is there to free the princess so she can warn her people about the attack. Then the girl removes her coat and asks Nausicaä to change clothes with her. The plan was for the two to switch places, so the princess of the Valley of the Wind could escape undetected. After leaving that room, the girl is taken to another compartment of the ship, where the women and children were. Asbel is also there waiting for her and takes the girl to her glider. Upon opening the takeoff gate, they are bombarded by the Torimikian aircraft. The people of Pejete head for the clouds in an attempt to dodge the attacks, but they are surprised by a strong storm. They are then forced out of the clouds and, in doing so, end up having their aircraft overrun. As the battle unfolds, Asbel helps Nausicaä prepare for takeoff. However, they are surprised by a soldier who appears in the cargo compartment. The young man tries to hold the man and pushes the glider for the princess to run away. Nausicaä is soon detected by the fighter ship, which begins to pursue her. While running away, she comes across Mito's airship, which was flying over the forest looking for the girl. The man bombs the Torimikan's ship and manages to bring it down. Yupa was with him and, as Nausicaa's requests, goes to Pahit's ship to help them fight the invasion. Meanwhile, Mito and the princess quickly fly to the valley. When crossing the Dead Sea, they head under the clouds. At that moment, the princess sees thousands of angry Omis running towards the Valley of the Wind. She leaves in search of something that is luring the Omis to the village and finds a Pejete airship carrying a wounded baby Omu as bait. Nausicaä takes her glider and flies there. Meanwhile, Mito goes to the Valley of the Wind, where an armed war is about to break out between the villagers and Torimikia's soldiers. Mito lands on the spot and Kushana orders her soldiers to stop the attack. The man informs him that several Omis filled with hate is about to arrive at the village. He directs the people to flee to the highest possible place. However, the army decides to stay and face those creatures. The princess tries to reason with the men, but they are determined to finish her off. The girl manages to dodge most attacks, but when she approaches the ship, she ends up being hit. She manages to free the baby Omu. However, he is very injured and can barely move. Even hurt, she approaches the animal, which is filled with rage. The Omu tries to run away across the lake. However, the water was too acid. If he went in there with all those injuries, he would end up getting killed. Nausicaä tries to stop him, but the little monster is stronger and drags her into the lake. The girl screams in pain after her wounded foot comes in contact with the water, and the Omu realizes she is just trying to save him. This causes him to back down and all his hatred melts away. The princess falls to the ground in pain and little Omu uses his tentacles to heal her. Nausicaä sees that, despite the fact that she saved the baby Omu, the Omus continues to head towards the village. So, she uses a weapon to compel those men to take the animal to the battlefield. Otherwise, her people would be slaughtered. Seeing all those monsters, the soldiers decide to abandon the battle. As they try to flee, they spot Kushana. The woman appears on the mountain, mounted on a tank. Just behind her is the giant warrior, descendant of the ancient giants that populated the earth. However, the monster's body had not yet developed enough and was therefore decomposing. The creature launches its first attack, a jet of fire capable of producing an explosion and destroying hundreds of Omus. Still, the invasion continues. The attack only served to make the Omus even more enraged. The god warrior launches its second and final attack. After that, his body finishes decomposing. The humans are alone again, and now their only option is to flee from that place. Meanwhile, Nausicaä approaches the village along with the injured baby Omu. She lands right in front of that angry crowd and tries to get them to calm down. However, nothing can stop them. The Omus run over the baby Omu and the girl, flinging her body away, and then go towards the army soldiers and villagers. However, during the attack, something unusual happens. Yupa is flying over the place in Pahit's aircraft and notices that all of the red eyes are gradually turning blue. That meant that, for some reason, the Omus were calming down and ceasing their attack. The cause was the presence of Nausicaä. The girl had sacrificed herself to save the baby Omu, and this act made the animal's hatred disappear. Upon seeing the girl's body, the little monster approaches and begins to heal her. Then the other Omus team up to save the young woman with their golden tentacles. The princess wakes up and Tito is beside her. Her wounds have healed and she begins to walk under the golden field, as the ancient prophecy said. In this way, Nausicaä becomes the savior, who freed the earth from the wrath of the Omus. After that, the animals return to the forest and the princess is greeted with great joy by her people. Will the Valley of the Wind finally find peace this time? So what did you think of this anime? Leave it in the comments below. And if you liked the video, like and subscribe for more anime recaps. See you next time.